Hello everyone and welcome back to my Warhammer 40k guides. I am Brady and today I would like to talk about the Castellan Knight. So I've been mentioning this for a while, but I think that the Castellan is not very healthy for the game. So I would like to discuss my thoughts and hear what you guys and gals think about it. So for those of you who have been living under a rock, the Castellan Knight is a 604 point model that comes with a bunch of high damage weapons and a bunch of stratagems that boost the unit's efficiency and durability significantly. We have been seeing a ton of this guy in competitive play, and he's been featured in almost all of the top Imperium lists for the last few months. Normally my mentality towards this type of unit being so popular is to try and adapt in order to take it on. And you can still do that with this unit. By all means, it's not unbeatable, so you can definitely build lists that counter it. You can kill it with some armies and tactics, or you can build a list that doesn't care about its high damage shots or its extremely good durability, and you can just ignore it completely while killing everything else and playing to the mission. So again, I'm not saying it's unbeatable, because it definitely is. So that's not my issue with the Castellan Knight. The problem I have with the Castellan Knight is that this unit invalidates so many units in the game. Take roughly half of every codex in existence, mainly all the vehicles and a bunch of monsters. And all those units are now suboptimal to bring in competitive play because of this one unit, the Castellan Knight. If you find yourself against a Castellan while most of your list has a bunch of vehicles or monsters, you can say goodbye to 2 or 3 of those vehicles or monsters each turn, as long as the Castellan player rolls average or higher when using the reroll all 1 stratagem, which includes rerolling ones for hits, wounds, number of shots, and damage. And the thing is, normally this would be fair, since if you go first, you can always try to kill the thing that's going to cause that much damage to you, or at least damage it enough that you would lower its efficiency. But with the Castellan, it has a 3+ invulnerable save while having 28 wounds at toughness 8. This means more often than not you will only put a dent in it even if you go first. And let's say you get lucky and you do happen to bring it down a bracket and lower its efficiency. Well, the Castellan player just uses a stratagem for 1 command point to boost it back up to full ballistic skill anyways. Then they use the reroll all 1 stratagem for maximum efficiency. And because you put so much firepower into the Castellan to basically accomplish nothing, the opponent still has a ton of stuff that took little to no damage, and you basically wasted your whole turn. So in my opinion, it's better to go after everything else and ignore the Castellan with most lists. But then you're getting destroyed all game by this one almost unkillable unit. This unit is just overloaded with its efficiency and durability. One of the rewards for my patron tiers is to critique lists for my patrons and let them know my thoughts on their list and if anything in the list needs to be changed to make it more optimal for today's meta. And one phrase I find myself saying a whole lot is, well, that list would be great, but if you play against a Castellan, you're most likely going to lose X, Y, and Z on turn 1, which will make it very hard for you to make a comeback. And with how popular the Castellan is right now, you're definitely bound to play at least a list or 2 at a large event that's going to have a Castellan in them. If the Castellan wasn't so popular, this wouldn't be a problem. But it is very popular. So because of this one unit, there are a ton of units in the game that just aren't optimal, and it forces you to run the Castellan yourself if you play Imperium, and to bring multiple battalions or a brigade to fund it. You could also argue, well, why hate on the Castellan because it's so popular? Everyone takes the Loyal 32, so why aren't you complaining about them since they're just as popular? And my argument to that is, well, the Loyal 32 isn't nuking 2 to 3 vehicles a turn, and they aren't very hard to kill. They are just an easy 5 command points from a battalion and a few cheap bodies to hold objectives with or screen with. That's entirely different from a super durable unit that can delete multiple units off the table in 1 turn. The Loyal 32 also doesn't technically invalidate a bunch of units. If anything, they only really invalidate tactical marines, but even then you could argue that scouts invalidate tactical marines. So there's not really much of an argument to be had there in my opinion. And also with the Loyal 32, they don't really invalidate scouts or even rangers from AdMech. It's still completely viable to bring a Space Marine battalion with scouts or rangers in a battalion with AdMech. But the same can't be said about bringing Land Raiders in a list versus bringing a Castellan in a list, or bringing Predators in a list versus bringing a Castellan in a list. Hell, even Baneblade variants are suboptimal when you consider the Castellan. So many cool units just can't compete with the Castellan, and I think that's unhealthy for the game and it lowers the variety in top lists. So that's my main problem that I have with the Castellan. Again, it's definitely beatable. I've personally beaten the Castellan plus Guard Brigade list a few times in practice myself. It's definitely doable. I've even seen people get lucky and nuke the Castellan turn 1, mainly Eldari players with the combination of Dark Reapers plus Doom plus Jinx plus Agents of Ect. The problem I have with the Castellan is that this one unit just makes so many units in the game unplayable at a competitive level. That one unit by itself forced a huge change in the meta and made so many cool units invalid. Personally, I think it's alright when an entire army changes the meta, but when one unit is changing the meta this much, I think it's kind of absurd. Do you want to bring land raiders? Well, if you face a Castellan, say goodbye to them, and even if you do go first, you can't really do much to the Castellan. Want to bring Mortarion? Well, if you face against a Castellan, well, say goodbye to Mortarion, and even if you go first, you can't really do much against them. Want to bring a Storm Raven? Well, if you play against a Castellan, you can say goodbye to it on turn 1, and even if you do get turn 1, well, there's not really much you can do against a Castellan. This phrase is constant when talking about a ton of units in the game. The Castellan invalidates so many cool units that I wish we could see more of in competitive play. Personally, I feel like the Castellan definitely needs a few more tweaks. Maybe higher points cost. Maybe have rotate ion shields not work with ion bulwark. There are a few ways you can change the Castellan to make it much more manageable to play against or less appealing to take so it's not as popular as it is now. The changes that Games Workshop originally made to it by increasing the cost of certain stratagems helped a tiny little bit, but I don't think it was enough to level the playing field for all of the units that the Castellan makes invalid. That's just my opinion though. I understand everyone may feel differently about the Castellan and how it's impacted the meta, but personally, I wish it was tweaked a bit more so that we would have more options in competitive for every army. Imperial armies feel like they are forced to bring one themselves, but even other armies have to tailor their lists to deal with this one unit as well. And for a lot of those armies, quote-unquote, dealing with the Castellan means ignoring it altogether and bringing a list that mitigates the amount of damage it can do to them. For example, let's say you were playing Space Marines. Sure, the Castellan can kill 15 Marines a turn, but that's nothing compared to killing 2 Land Raiders a turn, at least when you consider the points you would lose. So this one unit is what makes me believe that at the LVO and at other events, we will see more Horde armies and infantry-based armies on the top tables, because currently they are the best at dealing with the Castellan. Not because they can kill the Castellan either, but because they take the least damage from it. And when you're building an army with the thought, how do I take the least damage from the Castellan each turn since I can't kill it myself, that's when I feel something is wrong with the balance of that unit. Again, this is just my thoughts on the unit. I don't have anything against people who use the Castellan themselves, because by all means, use the units and options you have available to you that will give you the best chance of winning. That's what competitive is all about anyways. I just wish that the Castellan wasn't as efficient as it currently is for its points, so that way it wouldn't be as popular as it currently is, and it would open up a ton of options for Imperium and even other armies to use different units that currently are invalidated because of the Castellan. And also, because I'm tired of saying the phrase, sure, that unit is great, but if you go up against a Castellan, that unit's probably going to die turn 1 and not be that useful. So with all of that said, let's talk very briefly on how you can beat a list that has a Castellan Knight in it. So the first option is to make a Horde list that doesn't mind losing 15 plus models a turn to the Castellan, and also to play to the mission and win on points. If you do this correctly with a well-made list, you can either kill everything your opponent has other than the Castellan, and you can get many more points by playing to the mission. With that said, unless you have a list that is dedicated to being able to kill the Castellan, I wouldn't pick any ITC secondaries that have to do with the Castellan itself, and instead I would pick secondaries based off of the rest of their army, since those units will be much easier to kill and deal with. Ignoring the Castellan with some armies is definitely a viable strategy. The second option is to use some sort of gimmick. For example, Agents of Ect plus Doom plus Jinx. You use a combo like that and try to kill the Castellan on turn 1. This can sometimes work, but sometimes can backfire too, because if your opponent gets lucky with their 5+ invulnerable saves, or you get unlucky with your shots, you pretty much wasted your whole turn, because like I mentioned earlier on in the video, if the Castellan is brought down a bracket, it can still use a stratagem to fire at full ballistic skill. Also, in order to get in range for Doom plus Jinx, you probably had to overextend to be able to pull that off. You also have a chance of getting those spells denied. And even if they don't get denied and say you do kill the Castellan on turn 1, you're still overextended, which means you're now in rapid fire range of pretty much your opponent's entire army, or you're in charge range of your opponent's entire army. So your opponent might still get a decent trade back even if you happen to do get lucky and kill the Castellan. This exact situation was shown in the finals of the SoCal Open, and I even made a video going over the match and discussing it. If you're interested in checking out that video, I will have a link for it in the description. But back on topic, overextending on turn 1 to try and nuke the Castellan is an alright strategy, but I feel there are too many downsides and things could easily go horribly wrong for you and you can cost yourself the game because of it. The next strategy on taking on a Castellan is to bring a big durable unit yourself, so either your own Castellan or even something like Magnus the Red. If you bring your own Castellan, then you and your opponent shoot each other and whoever gets luckier wins the battle. Either that, or one thing you can do is to play more reserved with your Castellan and let your opponent use up all their CP before you use up all of yours. This way, by turn 3 or 4, they run out of their command points to fund rotate ion shields, and that's when you use your Castellan to light up the enemy Castellan and hope for the best. You can also try doing things like getting a jump pack librarian with null zone within range of the enemy Castellan and blow it up that way, but that's super unreliable since your opponent will most likely have a ton of guard bodies to block the area and screen for it. Magnus is alright to bring against the Castellan as well, but really only if you get to go first, because Magnus without his -1 to hit and 3+ invul can still be one-shot by the Castellan. So in my opinion, I feel like this is a really big gamble, which is why I wouldn't choose to do it myself. And the final strategy on taking on a Castellan is to bring a bunch of strong melee units, since the Castellan doesn't have an invulnerable save in close combat. The problem with this strategy though is again that the opponent will most likely have a ton of cheap bodies and units that can keep your melee units off of the Castellan long enough for the Castellan to blow up those melee threats before they get anywhere near it. So out of all these strategies, I feel like the Horde method that ignores the Castellan is the best bet. An army like Orcs would be great against the Castellan list, since they don't really care about losing 20 boys on turn 1, since they can just Tide of Traitors to get them back anyways. Same with Chaos armies like Thousand Suns and spamming Plague Bearers or Cultists. It's not a huge deal to lose those models. So the best strategy in my opinion to beat a Castellan list is to ignore it and give it 0 good targets to shoot at. And again, I feel like if this kind of strategy is the most optimal for taking on a specific unit in the game, then that unit needs some adjustments, especially if it can nuke multiple units for a turn from across the table. Anyways, that's going to be it for this video. Let me know down in the comments what you guys and gals think about the Castellan and its impact on the meta. I'd love to know your thoughts. Also, don't forget to check out the channel's sponsor, 9.5 Miniature Painting, if you would like some commissions done on your army. Also, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more Warhammer 40k content if you enjoyed this video. And if you enjoy my channel and the content that I provide and would like to help support the channel even further, then check me out on Patreon. Like I said earlier, I have different pledge tiers that offer different rewards, including stuff like list critiquing, or even a tier that allows you to make a request on a video topic for the channel. So check me out on Patreon if any of that sounds interesting to you, or if you just want to help support the channel so that I can continue playing Warhammer and making videos full time. So thanks again for watching the video, I hope you all enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next one. Happy wargaming.